Hey everybody, good morning. So it's a beautiful day here in Ohio, and I was listening to a YouTube video about the 1960s, the hippie generation, right? Because that was a point in time where people were exploring living outside the box. Lots of free sex, lots of marijuana, drugs. There was a lot of racial tensions and, protests against, like, I guess promoting feminism. There was a lot of social mores being re-examined and figured out, which I guess is a good thing too, because, women definitely need to have a place in the workforce. But I think we've definitely gone way far to the other side of it, but I'll get to that point in a minute. The whole thing with the war, which is interesting, the Vietnam War, because I'm a product of the Vietnam War. So I was listening to how they even started, with the whole thing with the hippie movement. And of course, it was from the 1950s, right? So the 1950s, you're stuck in a box. Women had a place, men had a place, children had a place. Maybe it was a better time back then. And then, right, I understand, Jennifer. Yes, feminism was planned and executed, right? But I mean, if it wasn't for some of these, I guess, social explosions, I would say, then would it then pave the way for women and men to be able to try to compete equally on an intellectual basis out there in the workforce? So in some ways, you almost have to sort of like say, okay, it was a growth process, because the 1950s, women were stuck in a box and men were always out there always out there in the workforce, and the women were just stuck at home, cooking and cleaning, and didn't have anything to offer except, sewing circles and learning how to cook, right? So we don't want to totally go back to that day and age where women had absolutely no say in anything. We needed to explore and see how can we give the African Americans and the women some kind of equal footing so we all can compete relatively equal, right? So back then in the 1960s and 70s, with this whole explosion of everything, it was a good exploration. However, it was taken to such an extreme. So we went from being totally conservative in the 1950s to then the 1960s go completely the other side. The pendulum swung way the other way, right? So that's 1960s and 70s. And in the 80s, they're trying to figure out, okay, how can we have a mixture of the 1950s and the 1960s, right? So the 1940s and 1950s were then merged with the 1960s and the 1970s, and that's where the 1980s and 1990s kind of came about. So then now we're in the 20s, right? The 2000s, the decade of the 2000s. And we know that this paved the way, right? Obviously, yes, we know that employees get 2 times. We understand that. But we have to understand that without, another set of people giving their thought process, intellect, would we be where we are today? If I didn't have some kind of somebody, paving the way for me, and that includes even the holistic people, right? But now we have to set things aside, and we have to now stand alone. We can still ride on the backs of our predecessors and give them, okay, they paved the way, totally can't discount them, but we can point out what was wrong with this, and then how can we find a way to come to center. We get too extreme where we totally demonize, which I'm looking at too, because we wouldn't be able to be here where we are today if it wasn't for exploring both sides. Now, we can explore both sides and point out the negatives and why, if we keep continuing with that trajectory of complete feminism and complete holistic negative elements, entertainment type of thing, then we can show obvious evidence that it is, contributing to the progressive death trajectory. Okay, so what I am now proposing and looking at is we can finally come to center. We don't have to be so extreme and so 1950s where we've hampered any type of self-expression from women and African Americans and other minorities, right? So we're giving people a voice, everybody relatively equal voice, right? We don't have to hamper that. And then now we have to look at this whole thing with the sex. Yes, sex back in the 1950s was behind closed doors. They faded to black before they even went into that in the movies. So, the 1960s and 70s where everything just went like, okay, we're just gonna have sex in front of everybody, right? So before, sex was like hardly even talked about, and then 1960s and 70s, they were having sex in the park. Everybody was just exchanging partners. Everybody was such an expression, and it was celebrating, right, the death trajectory, because when you're totally sexual, it means that the body wants to make copies of itself. So right there was telling you with the marijuana and the drugs, that was creating and paving the way for that death trajectory because there's so much of it. And then right there, hand in hand, there's the sex. So you have all this heavy drug use and then highly sexual people. Right there just substantiates my theory around reproduction and why it happens. So then you have the 1960s where you're doing all this marijuana, and then you have the 1980s where they're just like, oh, hold on a second, just say no, right? And they probably had it right in the 1980s. And then somehow, somewhere, someone figured out how to then capitalize on the legalization as well as making it illegal, putting specific stipulations. And if you don't follow these specific stipulations, then that's how they're going to get money out of you or make you go to jail or something, right? So now we're in the 2000s. Now we're in the 2000s, right? And we're seeing the results of the pendulum swinging way the other direction. And we're kind of revisiting again, right? So we went from the just say no to, with the whole Tipper Gore and the Nancy Reagan just say no campaign. This is your brain on drugs. This is your brain. This is your whatever. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? Remember that PSA all the time going through the TV, right? Now we're just like completely legalizing everything. We're using every single negative element out there as a way to anesthetize you and then tie it in with the health and wellness industry. So now the pendulum is swinging the other direction yet again. So now, finally, we can say, okay, let's see if we can find center again. And what is center is, yes, we realize that some people need to have their drugs for a certain amount of time, but not indefinitely. This is where my protocol comes into place, because it's a period of transition to where eventually, if we want to keep living indefinitely, we have got to revisit why drugs should at all be in our life at all. And so really now we have to say, okay, drugs are only a transition point for those that are managing illnesses that are painful. And now we've established that pain is healing. But some of us can't handle the pain because we have been anesthetized for such a long time that facing that pain like cold turkey would be devastating to some people. Not everybody, but you know who you are, that are totally still heavily addicted to your drugs, whatever they are, drugs and alcohol. So now we've established that drugs and alcohol and all of the things that are being controlled is only going to be a transition point. This is where we're going to come to center. It's not going to be an indefinite, which right now we're seeing the marijuana and the legalization of that, as well as other types of drugs. It's not going to be an indefinite. And it should never be an indefinite where you're completely anesthetized 24/7, dealing with health issues. And so, yes, there are people on my Facebook that I had to release yet once again. That guy, John Oakes, Because yeah, I'm being honest with you. If you are completely stoned all the time and you're not drinking enough of my juice to where your intention is to finally get rid of pot, because right now I don't see myself ever smoking pot again. As far as, I mean, maybe I'll go to a party and take a toke but even then, I mean, I don't go to very many parties. So if I'm going to smoke any pot, it'd be like once a year, if that, because I don't do parties to where I have to go and alter my personality. But my whole point is that the whole point is not to be smoking and drinking ever, maybe on an occasional basis. But that's where I want us to go down that trajectory. That's the whole point of this protocol, is to question, why it's in your life to begin with. And so that guy, John Oakes, he's been smoking since he was 13. And I'm saying this because he put that on my page. He was saying, I've been smoking since I was 13 years old. So he has been anesthetized since he was 13 years old. And now someone's saying, hey, you smoke and pot, or you are on these specific drugs, whatever they are, or taking these detoxes. That is just covering up the healing, because it's painful and you've been taught that pain is not a good thing. Now someone's telling you, hey, maybe you need to have the intention not to keep anesthetizing yourself. Maybe you need to face those demons. And some people who have been smoking for such a long time have never been able to face their demons. And so when someone proposes them that, yes, smoke and pot on a continuous daily basis is putting you on a death trajectory if you have no intention of ever getting off of it. And I know I sound like some purist that, oh, just say no, but really just say no, because the reason why you're on these drugs to begin with is because you're healing and you can't handle the pain. So you're trying to escape it. So now with this protocol, it's forcing you to face some stuff that you didn't want to. When you are taking your prescription drugs, you're hiding the fact that you fucked up your body to where now you have to be artificially manipulated with elements. When you're smoking pot, you're escaping all of the PTSD that happened to you in the past, and you're not facing it head on. If you're dealing with different, stones or, respiratory infections and all these things are going on, if you're, if you're still sick, it means that your immune system is functioning at a very low level, and you're not, you still have a long way to go. And if you're still taking drugs, it's still going to put you behind the 8 ball. It's going to undermine the healing process because it does lower your immune system. Some people may need to because they have so much anxiety and it kind of keeps them at an even keel. But really what you need to be doing is drinking a shiz ton of nutrients and salt and cabbage and kale, so you can then override that and never have to revisit that again. Yes, it definitely is a wake-up call. And so I know I keep belaboring the thing about cannabis, but it makes sense because as I study history, like I said, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's exactly what's going on, is that we have forgotten why it is that the whole drug revolution and sexual revolution was so huge back in the 1960s, right? And then they're just like, okay, hold on a second, society changed in the 1980s. Is just say no, even though there was the cocaine stuff, right? That was also in the background. But there was campaigns from the Republican Party. What's his name? Was it Reagan's, Nancy Reagan, Ronald Reagan? Just say no. They had those PSAs all over the place. There was a reason behind it. They knew, their gut knew. The first reaction that the government and the people knew was the drugs were going to downfall of our society. They knew it. And then somehow things got skewed in the 90s and then the 2000s, and they found a way to capitalize on the weaknesses of the population. And then somehow this whole divide and conquer and this conspiracy stuff about the government trying to do this and that, which, believe me, I do believe on certain aspects that the government isn't exactly in our best favor, but they also are. So this whole extreme belief system that the government is horrible in every single way is now going to take you down that death trajectory. Because the more that you have a one belief system that the government is evil in every single way, you're not going to realize that the reason why they're controlling pot and controlling certain things is because they know it'll be abused and it will destroy your life. They've seen it. They still need you guys to work. They still need you guys to be relatively happy so you can make money for the machine. They don't want to completely shoot themselves in the foot and, completely like just destroy you. But they know there are certain people in our society that aren't contributing too much and they're completely anesthetized. So what's the best way to get rid of a population that's useless? They get them stoned 24/7. So they don't contribute anything of worth of value. And then they go fall over the cliff, and then they pass that mentality down to their kids, so their kids don't contribute, and then they die in the system. And then that's how it works. Those that don't drink a lot and don't smoke a lot and face their demons are going to be the successful people, because they will face their issues and they will move past those issues and they will create an amazing life, and yes, still work for the system and give the system the best they got so they can change the system. But those that are still stuck, that are sick, that aren't contributing too much to society, they will follow that trajectory, that death trajectory. And that was hard for John to even see. He's like, that's so judgmental that you're saying this about people who are pot smokers, that they're basically on death trajectory. But you are, because you're anesthetizing the healing process. You're completely running away from your pain. And when you run away from your pain and when you cover it up with agents, guess what? You won't know at all where you are until one day you fall over that cliff and you would wonder why. You have to, and some people say, well, it's good to smoke pot once in a while to think about your life. And believe me, I've justified using pot too during my healing process. And I look at why I used it, because things were stressful. Things have been stressful. But now I don't see a need for it. It does dull the senses. It really does. It dulls the senses. It dulls your motor neurons. It completely makes you unaware of the things, the dangers that are coming down the pipeline. I've messed up really expensive phones when I was smoking pot a few years ago. Trying to fix it, not even knowing it. And it's almost like something else took over. I was trying to fix this one phone. It's a nice phone, big phone, right? Big screen. It's from Verizon. It was probably like $300 or $400. And I bought it like 2 years ago. And I was trying to get it open, and I used a screwdriver, and it put it right where you put in the, the port, the recharging port, and I messed up that recharge port. So there's nothing that could recharge that phone anymore. But I was stoned during that time. I wasn't thinking. I was just reacting, trying to figure out how to open up the case, and I used whatever was the easiest, a screwdriver and then the recharging port, and then I messed it up. That phone is done. If I was actually in my right mind, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have just reacted and tried to find any way possible to open up my phone and screw it up. So yeah, anybody that is drinking alcohol on this protocol, or smoking pot, or doing anything to cover up your senses or your pain, you need to be questioning why. If you're still managing the same symptoms from a year ago, and you haven't overcome some kidney issues, then you need to figure out how much you're drinking for one, and what are you doing on a daily basis to undermine your progress. Like, seriously, this juice is the major barometer of where you are and what you turn to. You turn to anesthetizing agents, then you have some messed up things going on still in your body, and you got to be more aggressive with the juice. Because drugs, no matter what, even if with your body or with the workplace or with society or with driving or with anything, is a negative. Totally a negative. But some drugs are more accepted than others as far as the workplace, like Tylenol. But it's still a negative because it is gut destroying. But remember, healing is very painful. But you got to gauge how much you can take and have the intention to eventually be 100% free from the drugs. And I've never, ever even imagined myself to be on this anti-drug campaign. If you would have asked me 2 or 3 years ago if I was going to be harboring on the marijuana or any type of drugs, I would have said, hey, no, I mean, because that's not where my head was at. My head was in the healing process. But then I realized to what extent the damage marijuana is, cannabis oil, all the different agents, negative agents that suppress the immune system. I realized how detrimental they are to growth in our society. There are people that are mentally still adolescent because they've smoked so much pot their whole life because they're dealing with a chronic condition. They will not be able to grow intellectually, maybe intellectually a little bit, not really, because how can you really grow new brain cells when you're completely zombified in a fog? So they will stay in their perspective position in society. They won't grow outside of their expected position. They'll get through, and then as the body breaks down, they will accept, be like, oh yes, I'm growing old gracefully, and I love life, but I know death is to be expected, and my energy is this. I mean, these are all of the excuses from those that are complete pot smokers, is that they know there's going to be an ending and they embrace that ending. And that is the mentality the system wants these types of people to adopt, is that they are here on this earth for about 30 years to raise your kids, to sort of contribute to the system in their prospective jobs, and then be okay with dying at around maybe 65, 70, if that. Because look what they're doing. They are completely lowering your immune system so you have kids if you want it, if you don't have anything attacking your uterus. So you're stuck at home raising kids with a mortgage, with a car payment, with all these different payments, right? So it means that you have to go to work for the state, work for a big company, which is holding you captive for those many years. And then you're like, oh, it's all about children first. My kids are my life. Well, that's exactly the mentality the system wants you to adopt. And people think that that's like so revolutionary. Oh, my kids are my life. Oh, my kids are the best thing. Well, of course they are, because that's exactly how they position it. You have kids, you have a mortgage, you ain't going anywhere. They know, yeah, you're going to probably partake in a little bit of marijuana, a little bit of alcohol, just to kind of keep you a little bit satisfied, make you think that it's okay, that life is okay. And then eventually you grow old and you die, or you have cell degradation. Now, I'm not saying having kids is a horrible thing. No, it's not. But it does saddle the man, because he's held to a specific position where he has to be the breadwinner. It keeps the mom held accountable and staying in her perspective area, not venturing too far, because she has kids to watch. She has play dates to go do. She has, she's got to be a soccer mom and then pride themselves that I am kid first, and they're not doing anything really revolutionary in the system, because their whole claim to fame is they're raising their kids. So no, they're not going to be a revolutionary in the system. They're going to be another cog in the wheel of the system. And pot just keeps you at a very predictable level. Drugs, all of your drugs keep you at a very predictable level, because for you to have drugs, you got to have health insurance. For you to have health insurance, you got to have a job. Or you have proven that you are disabled and you're willing to live below the poverty level at whatever, disability check that you get, and then you're housebound at home, smoking your pot, because when somebody is disabled to that point, they get a medical marijuana license. And then guess what? They are anesthetized for the rest of their life until they pass away in the system. That's exactly what the system wants from their people who aren't contributing at an aggressive level. So that's why they're allowing the pot to happen, because they want to get rid of the useless eaters. And they are not allowing it for those that really have a potential to revolutionize the system. So they're saying, hey, if you can hold a job and you are, and you can go to work and you are relatively intelligent and you're not physically incapable, well, we don't want the drugs to take you down because we need you to keep the system going. Right? So that's how they're able to capitalize on both sides of that issue. They make it illegal, really, for those that are contributing to the system, and they make it legal for those that are useless eaters, disabled, lots of issues, PTSD. So they fear you, they keep anesthetizing you. You eventually will go over that cliff. They haven't figured out that those that are disabled and on Gilead use protocol can make their life better and contribute in a different way. They're expecting you to die in the system when you are on medical marijuana. They actually are expecting you to eventually pass away, because that's what marijuana does. It lowers your immune system. It lowers everything. So now you're susceptible to everything, all the exotic diseases. You're also easily influenced because you're at such a low vibrational, you'll believe anything that's out there, which is why you're seeing people who are totally pissed off at me when I'm railing against the cannabis industry, because they're hardwired programming now is, oh, the government is so horrible and they've totally made pot illegal because of the pharmaceuticals industry. No, they're part of the pharmaceuticals industry, and even pot grown in your backyard is just as bad as pot grown in a lab. Okay? So don't fool yourself into thinking that there's a difference. There really isn't, but that is the programming, the one-dimensional programming that is out there. So this is why they've made it illegal and legal. They made it legal for those that are useless eaters, and they made it illegal for those that actually have something to contribute. And they don't want to see you go down that path of being a useless eater. They're giving you a choice, and they're holding you accountable. If you want to be a contributing member to society, working and having, an amazing life, then they don't want you to be one of those that are disabled, sitting at home smoking pot 24/7. They don't want that, but they know people are that way, and they're going to make their passing in life so much easier. So yes, they're going to give you a marijuana license. They'll make it easy for you to basically commit suicide. Or what is it? Euthanasia. It's a slow euthanasia. I get it now. I really do. I mean, yeah, I was looking at another one-dimensional way of looking at it, was that they make it illegal because they can make money on that end of it. And then they make it legal because there's still money, taxes, and everything else. So that's how the government also, but they also know that there are people in our society that are not contributing and are getting high 24/7, and we need to get rid of the useless eaters. So that's another way to get rid of the useless eaters, is to get them high 24/7. So they're eating all the crap and they're lowering their immune system, and then their body will eventually give out. They've taxed their body to such an extent. It's a trip. It really is. Now that I look at it. When you look at it deeper and you realize, and I do, whenever I do something that alters my mindset, and I don't drink alcohol, so the only thing I've ever done was marijuana. I look at why it is that I was smoking that marijuana. And it was because it was a healing that was trying to hide from the healing. Now I don't need to, I'm not healing. I mean, yes, I've had some issues. But I have not had to turn to marijuana to deal with them. Not even to just think about life and how all my information is being transcended to the next person or whatever, right? No, I don't even need to do that. But those of you that, that are still going through the healing process, I get it. You need to do your drugs. It's a transition point. All drugs, no matter if it's Tylenol to marijuana to LSD or whatever, for whatever reason, it's a transition point, but it should never be as an indefinite if you truly want to heal. If you truly want to heal, your intention is to get off all of your drugs, regardless of what they are. And if it's not your intention to get off the drugs, then you really don't truly want to heal. You're just paying lip service to something because it's easy and it's trendy and okay, and that's fine. That's your own choice. So George Etheridge said, yes, of course, I've smoked for 20 years. It wasn't until I came across this juice, as well as channeling my spare time through the spiritual side with meditation and plateau a few times, wanting to find out about effects mentally and physically. I've had to get clearing a few times because the entities were blocking me from progressing forward. Yeah. When you do lower because your immune system is tied to your spiritual side. It really is. When your immune system is being anesthetized or it is under attack, there's no way that you can really truly tap into something that is life-changing to get you to that next level. It's physically impossible. I don't think I've dreamt every single night this last couple weeks. I'm on a different trajectory, a different mentality. I am seeing things very clear, and I have no problem talking about it. And that's what I hope for all of you that are still in the process, is that you eventually I'm not saying that at all. But who knows what your life will become once you do become 100% clear, when you don't have to go and anesthetize yourself, when you do heal from every single past traumatic event you've ever had in your life, whether it's physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. What would life be like? And you couldn't even know. You don't even know that you don't even know what that would be. But imagine that you could. And now you have the access and the ability and the potential to do that. Why would you not even try to? If your whole situation is setting you up to where you are allowed to heal without anything like a job or major expectations, you need to take advantage, because you never know when that situation is going to end. You just don't know. So you might as well. Nothing is set in stone in life. So if you have the opportunity to heal 100%, I suggest you take it, because then life, you never know what life is going to, when you are in that mentality of 100% clearing. And it almost sounds like Scientology. I'm not trying to go to Scientology. But when you do release your addictions, you're going to find that your life is going to be so different. So different. So, and there is nothing good around drugs. There is nothing. Temporary, they're cures. Cures are temporary, because eventually the body is going to adapt to your drug use, and then the pain returns. All of that returns, and you got to up your dosage or find a different strain. Why do you think there's so many different strains in the cannabis world? Because I know when you overdo one, you have another one to go and upset your homeostasis and get you anesthetized. And then they're adding more elements. That's why the pharmaceutical grade is so much stronger, right? Because they're adding extra elements to then give you another upset of homeostasis to basically beat your body into submission of silence. So that's why you have a million different strains, no different than the million different strains of vaccines, all the different potential pathogens that you might come across in the dirt. Not. That's why there's so many different types of drugs that keep coming out on the market. The FDA keeps approving. The reason why the FDA approves those drugs is because they know there's still a population that has never been exposed to those drugs. So it will kind of work, I guess, temporarily until that person adapts to that drug, and then their pain and then their issues and their symptoms come back again. Then they have to go and change their prescription, find the new drug, because that drug doesn't work anymore. No different than the detoxes. Watch out for the dirt viruses. Oh my God, Tanya, that is funny. Brian, yeah. The dirt viruses, watch out. We need to get a vaccine against all the dirt viruses. So yeah, cures are prevalent. Cures are all over the place. And why they work for some and not work for others is because some people have already dabbled in that one cure. Like Xarelto, let's just use that for example. Xarelto is being advertised all over the TV. It's a new drug, or it's been, still being advertised because there's still population hasn't used it. But the ones that already have used it, got side effects, or it doesn't work anymore, so they're off that drug. But they know there's always a new person, a new market every day when somebody comes down with some kind of weird disorder. oh, Xarelto, you've never done, and I looked in your drug history and I see that you've never had any kind of strain or any kind of element conglomeration that even resembles Xarelto. So we're going to give you Xarelto. And then you tell me how it works. And they're like, oh, I love it. It's great, right? And then, yes, there's a placebo effect too, but placebo effect only goes so far. You're going to get some kind of placebo effect is like a cure. Okay? It's temporary, regardless of what you're taking, whether it's jelly juice or whether it's a drug. If you really believe it works and then it stops, and then you have to figure out what is stopping working mean that it stops working, you know? And that's where you have to look at context, understand, you know, the science behind my stuff. So yeah, so that's how it works. That's why vaccines work for some and not work for others, you know, as far as what people think what working is. They think that, oh, if I don't get any kind of reaction from a vaccine, it means it worked for me. No, it just means that you were already exposed, your body already had antibodies, and so you didn't have any symptoms. But now you have these future triggers, like the shingles virus that I guess is in some of these chickenpox vaccines, and it's deep within your cells, and they will trigger when your immune system is even degrading even more. And that's probably why people who are in their 50s and 60s contract shingles, because it's already in their body and it just came to surface. So there's a lot of backdoor triggers to a lot of these vaccines you're not aware of. So just because you don't have an actual reaction to a vaccine doesn't mean that it isn't working. Oh, it's working all right. It told you already been exposed, and we're going to give you more antigen to then break your body down even further when all the conditions are right. So now we need to get back to center with our body, get from way behind the 8 ball, right? Because we're all mutated to such an extent. And then we understand all the different balancing forces, which is in my recipe. So you're going to be experiencing pain. You're going to be experiencing symptoms relative to your past, present, and then future triggers. You're going to understand the positive and negative elements. And what is negative? Negative is anything that is anti-viral, antibiotic, antioxidant, anti-whatever, right? And that includes all the pills, powder, supplements, and what else? The detoxes. And then you're going to find out that cabbage, water, and salt is not a controlled substance for a reason. Now there is kale. And that's true, James Harper. The government and corporations aren't protecting you. Of course they're not. But they are and they aren't. This is where you have to kind of be able to give them a little bit, okay, James? Because if we say that the government hates us, then we're not actually giving them some kind of credibility. Back in the 80s, they actually had it right. They were saying, just say no. Because they knew that the drugs, marijuana or cocaine or all that stuff was really harming people. When we say just say no to drugs, it also meant all the drugs on the market that the FDA is approving. Because those are the cures, the temporary cures. So they knew, and that's why they make pot a category 1 or drug number 1 controlled substance, because they know. But they want to be able to use it for specific things. So the government kind of knows what's going on, but they're categorizing people in 2 different categories. They want someone like you who's intelligent, that will contribute something to the system, to stay intelligent. Don't dumb yourself down. But they know there's people who are disabled, who are completely malfunctioning, not able to get out of that. So they might as well keep them inebriated and anesthetized until they're over a cliff. That's what I'm trying to make that distinction, is that we have people in our society that are not contributing really. So we keep them anesthetized. Maybe they're raising their kids. Maybe they're doing a little bit of stuff, but they're really not contributing on the level that they need to be. So they're giving them a marijuana license. They're like, fine, go have at it. Go destroy yourself over time. And then they make it illegal for those that are actually functioning, that have jobs. So if you have a job, it means that you are a contributing member of society. Or if you wrote a book, or if you're doing something that's helping humanity, and you have something out there that's helping people, then they don't want you to be totally anesthetized and inebriated. They don't want you driving stoned or driving drunk. They're going to put the hammer down because they want to keep you alive too. They're playing with the different biochemistries. So negative biochemistries, they're fine. You chose to be a negative biochemistry. You chose to smoke pot and drink. Fine, do it. But we have specific stipulations around it. You got to prove that you're completely malfunctioned or you're disabled. But if you are, let's say, one of those that do work, then they're saying, okay, alcohol is okay for the weekends, but obviously you don't want to be blowing into an alcohol thing when you're driving a truck, right? So we're going to punish you if you start blowing positive with alcohol. And we're going to drug test you at the workplace because we don't want you to fall into that drug-ridden death trajectory. And they make money on both sides. So it's a money-making thing on both sides, as well as they're trying to differentiate people so they know who has the potential in our society. It doesn't mean that you're not on a death trajectory when you're working in the workplace, because they know eventually you're going to fall over if you're not doing Jilly Juice or doing something with the positive elements. But they want to keep you contributing for as long as they can. So that's why there's so many stipulations when it comes to drugs with a working person of society. So when you see all these people who are such proponents for cannabis, that's a lot of messed up people in our society, a lot of messed up people. And that could be the eugenics agenda. So, yeah. It's a very interesting state of affairs that we're dealing with. I actually am very I'm impressed with all of your guys' understanding of my information, because it's highly politicized, it's highly charged. With this thing with cannabis, it's very highly charged. And people take personal affronts to what I'm saying because of how long they've been programmed to think, to think that the government hates them. But yes, in some ways not. I think the government has a place. They helped me out with the OAG, okay? The Ohio Attorney General forced me to substantiate, and guess what? I met their expectations. So the only thing they had to say to me through the Federal Trade Commission is you can't advertise specific results because you can't guarantee that, and there is no science to back it up. There is science, but there isn't anything like a proof because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, right? So there's no way we can say anything's going to happen if we don't even know what the future holds, right? But you're right, James. It is a catch-22. Our protection is pretty much ensuring their investment as its worker. Oh, right, yeah. Absolutely. So they know who are the ones that are useless eaters, and they'll keep them over a cliff. And the other ones that aren't, still contributing in some way, keep them alive for as long as possible because we need them to go and haul steel, drive a truck. And this is where all then, the accountability and where your community keeps you pigeonholed. If someone says, they want to go and explore their life and they want to go and find themselves and they have 5 kids, you don't think that mother is going to receive flack because she left her 5 kids? The community and the system keep people pigeonholed and keep them in their place until that person doesn't care what society thinks anymore, and they will do what they do. You're fine, James. Okay, so yeah, so this is my whole thing about, my title of this whole transmission is everything is now getting back to center. We're either too top heavy, too far to the left, too far to the right, over medicated, malnourished, over anesthetized, underaware, overexposed, too angry, not angry enough, overly sensitive. Yeah, we've got to have where we are somehow in the middle, somewhere. So if you are aging, it means that your cells are degrading. You're too far to the left or right, whatever side of the spectrum we want to put you in. So we need to come back to center. The politics, you're too far to the right, it means that you're ignoring some merits and credibility of the left, because there's always some kind of positive in all the arguments. Just like with the thing with the drugs. I'm not saying get off all of your drugs right off the bat. It's a transition. Jilly Juice is a transition. We're not going to go straight up cold turkey all the way to the extreme. We're going to find a happy medium and understand positive and negative elements and understand the transition process. So we can be 100% amazing, thinking, revolutionary individuals that will contribute something amazing to society. Not just being a cog in the wheel, but what else can you offer our society to make it, to push it even further forward than where it's going? To transform society, right? There's progressive growth, which we have seen in the last 100 years, and then there's complete transformation. And that will probably happen on a collective basis. But you can transform your life. You won't be progressively, doing better. You will then jump from this plane to this plane without having to go through that gradual, but you will too. But, even just you discovering that your pancreatitis or your issues like your kidney is completely healed, that's right there transformational. When you're drinking chili juice and in 1 month your kidneys are amazing, that's transformational. You're not progressively, managing and getting better, right? Whatever that means to you. No, your kidneys have healed. Holy crap. That's amazing. It may not all of society, but now your life has changed. That's what I'm talking about. And then when everybody's lives have changed like that to that extent, then you can just see what it would look like in our society as a whole. But right now we know there's a segment of the population that wants to be anesthetized, that are fighting for their drugs, fighting for their alcohol, fighting for all of that, and then you can't do anything about that. That's their issue, not yours. So now it's about transforming your personal life. And then collectively, what is that going to look like? All right, I'm going to go and do my thing. But that was worth talking about, and I appreciate all of you guys listening. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.